Hello, I'm Jean Pete, and I welcome you back to our show, Better Living. Better Living is brought to you by the Homestead Hope Foundation and is sponsored by Homestead Hospice, where commitment to education and premier hospice care helps patients and families through life's most important journey. Thank you for joining me again this week. Now, every week I tell you how important our topic is for the week, and nothing is different this week. But we really do have an important topic to discuss with you. You know, we've heard in the news, there's hurricanes, there's tornadoes, there's typhoons, and I got to thinking, I have got to get somebody on this radio show to help our communities prepare for disasters, because inevitably, whatever kind of emergency or disaster occurs, something is going to happen and we need to be prepared. So today, I'm very excited to tell you, I'm here with Lisa Janik Newman, who is the spokesperson for the Georgia Emergency Management Agency's Ready Georgia campaign. That's a mouthful. But stay with us, whether you're from Georgia, you're from Phoenix, you're from New Orleans, wherever it is that you're listening to us from today. Lisa is the expert here, and she works out of Georgia, but the information we're going to share with you today is going to be very important no matter where you live, so that you can be prepared for an emergency. Simple things you might not even think about. So Lisa, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me.
I like to start by just asking you a little bit about yourself and how you got involved with GEMA, the Georgia Emergency Management Agency.
Oh, that was so long ago, I can barely remember. I was part of their child hire program. I'm just kidding. I started over 10 years ago, and originally I was hired to do their publications, but I have a real passion for emergency preparedness. So when we launched our Ready Georgia campaign in 2008, they asked me to head it up. So I've been doing that, and I've been enjoying educating people about how to prepare for any emergency that can happen to them. You mentioned typhoons and hurricanes and tornadoes, and that is all true, but anything that disrupts your life is an emergency. So it could be a fire, it could be a gas main break or a water main break in your neighborhood. So I'm happy to be here. And
could be medical.
Exactly.
And there's things that you can do to help yourself that you probably don't think about every day.
Exactly. Not until after something happens. And that's unfortunately what we find all too often, is that people think that nothing bad will happen to them until it does. Mm-hmm. And when it does, they wish they were ready. So if you just take a few minutes now, it takes less than an hour. It's not that expensive. Just to go ahead, get your kit together, make your plan. Hopefully you'll never need it, but when you need it, you need it.
Okay, so let's talk about that. What would be a kit? Let's help folks identify what are some smart things to do to prepare for an emergency. And it doesn't cost a lot.
No, not at all. And you probably have a lot of the items already at home. So think about some of the things you would need to survive for at least 3 days. First responders may not be able to get to you if roads are washed out or if a lot of trees are down. So we encourage people to be their own first responder and just be ready to survive. So think about basic needs: food, water, 1 gallon of water per person per day for at least 3 days, a first aid kit, a radio, battery-powered radio so you can get information and listen to your show, a NOAA weather radio, which is how you hear about watches and warnings that are issued by the National Weather Service. Even if you are asleep, it will wake you up in the middle of the night. Make sure you have a whistle to signal for help. God forbid if a tree falls on your house, if you get hoarse from yelling, you can blow your whistle so first responders can hear you. And think about your physical hygiene, personal needs. My mother-in-law, she wouldn't go anywhere without her curling iron. So think about those types of things that you would need to make you comfortable in an emergency.
This is my emergency preparedness kit, my Sally's flat iron. That's awesome. I love it. Okay, so a gallon per day per person for 3 days. So I'm a family of 4. I need 9 gallons of water somewhere.
Well, I was an English major, so I can't add that high, but you can
12.
visit our website.
I didn't even add right. 12.
You can visit our website at ready.ga.gov, and anybody can do this, and you can look at your state's website as well. But on our website, if you go there, you can fill out a personal profile, and it calculates all the supplies that you would need for your family. So it'll tell you exactly how many gallons of water you need, how many servings of protein you need, how many servings of vegetables you need, so you can know how much applesauce to buy for your Ready kit so you eat healthy. Plus, it will also prompt you to make a plan as well.
So let's talk about some of those food items. I'm just curious. What are the best food items to keep because, you can get your kit together and then you can forget about it. So I'm sure there's smarter food items to store than others. What do y'all recommend?
Sure. Non-perishable food. What is your favorite non-perishable food?
Well, I love what you just mentioned. I am a cinnamon applesauce fanatic. Love it.
Excellent. You're thinking healthy. A lot of people, for me, it's Snickers bars, which is a great thing to have in your ready kit as well. But again, you want to think about the food
because of the protein.
Well, you think about protein exactly. So peanut butter, tuna fish, canned meats. Think about whole grains, so granola bars. I think about making sure you have fruits, vegetables, so canned fruits and vegetables are great additions. And what you mentioned that you're worried about your food expiring, a lot of folks are. What we recommend you do is just every time you fall back or spring forward, just go ahead and look at the items and see what needs to be replaced. If you're like us in our household, we kind of dig in. Some of those items disappear during the year, so especially the yummy Snickers bar. So it's good just to check and periodically update it.
So can opener.
Exactly. You'll need a can opener to open that food.
Okay, great. And what, just a plastic tub?
Well, we recommend exactly something. You can put it in a backpack or a bag, but in our house, we have a plastic tote that you can buy at any big box store very inexpensively. And the reason why we have that is because of flooding, so you want to make sure that it's waterproof. So what we do in our house is when we hear a tornado watch, we get our ready kit out, we keep it nearby in a closet, and just put it in our safe area in our house, which is a hallway. We don't have a basement, so we just wait for the tornado warning.
Okay. You don't think about flooding, because I would think backpack's great in case we have to get out. We can just put it on our back, but that might not always be the best thing.
It's whatever works for you, but it's something waterproof or water resistant.
Okay, great. So you mentioned it's not just about disasters, and I want to talk a little bit more about preparing for a disaster and safe area and all that. I get so teased because I'm not from here. I'm from Boston. We really don't have tornadoes. They scare the living daylights out of me. So I am such a fanatic. I mean, we have bicycle helmets and sneakers, and we sit in the stairway because right now my basement's not done, and I'm afraid things are going to go flying. And so we have pillows and blankets, and my sister came to visit, and I said, okay, come on, let's go to the basement. And we had all our helmets and our sneakers, and I never lived that story down to this day. So what would be a good... So tell me, what do you recommend for, let's just talk about a specific disaster in the case of a tornado watch or a tornado warning. We air in New Orleans, the Gulf Coast, that's a prime area for hurricanes too. So what do you recommend? Do you recommend the bicycle helmets? Am I going a little overboard here?
Well, I think that the first thing you want to do is make sure you have a way to receive your warnings, no matter where you are, no matter where you live. The weather can turn on a dime. So sometimes you have an event with lots of notice, like a winter storm, which we're coming up on cold weather right now. And other times, not so much, like the tornado warning. So it's important that you have a way to receive your warnings, and then you know where your safe place is wherever you are, at home, at work, at school. So as you mentioned, your safe area is a basement or an interior room without windows. And I can't mention how many times I've walked through disaster sites with literally just one closet or one bathroom. The rest of the house was in rubble. So it's so important to know. And then if you have time, it's good to grab your extra pair of shoes and something to protect your head, certainly. But you can always duck and cover and protect your head if you need to. But the most important thing is to take that action and to take those warnings very seriously.
Absolutely. Now, let's talk about pets, too, because I always I'm just not so sure. I have the pet carrier, so when the tornado warnings come, I put them in the pet carrier and bring them down with us. But is that necessarily the right thing to do? Because what if everything is crushed? I just heard about the tornadoes in the Midwest, and some gentleman just found his dog, but the dog was able to wander out. Is it better to have him in a pet carrier or not? It kind of depends on time. I think you want to make sure to bring your pets inside if you can, and keep them with you. I wouldn't keep them in a pet carrier, but I would keep them with you. But
it's important to plan for them too. So you want to have a ready kit for them. You want to make sure that you have copies of their food, water, their favorite toy. If you have to evacuate, you will need your pet carrier. If you want to keep their important papers, just like in your ready kit, you should have your important documents, your insurance information, your vital records. You want to make sure that they have that as well. And this makes sure you have a plan for them. So if you need to go, we had a flooding event in Georgia in 2009 where all 4 interstates in Atlanta were underwater, even though we're 4 hours from the coast. Who would have ever thought it?
I remember that. I never thought I was going to get home.
Exactly. A lot of people never would have dreamed they're in that position. I was working in our state operations center, and a gentleman called and said, I survived Hurricane Katrina. I moved to middle Georgia. I never thought I would have to deal with flooding. Now the water is rising. Where do I take my Dalmatian? And 10 o'clock at night is just not the time to be thinking about that. So plan now, make arrangements with family or friends. Go ahead, find a pet-friendly hotel. Remember that in any disaster, you will either be asked to shelter in place or evacuate. So you just need you prepare the same way you have your ready kit, and you should include your pets in both of your plans if you have to stay home or leave.
Wow. Now, one thing just came to mind as you were talking about those floods, because I was a wreck. I had elementary school children, and the buses were dropping those kids off. And I was in Norcross at the time trying to get back to Kennesaw. And for folks who aren't familiar with those cities, that's at least an hour drive on a regular day. I didn't think I was going to get home in time to let my kids into the house. Right after that, I put in a code on the garage door so that they could get into the house anytime on their own. And I have to tell you, that has been peace of mind for me. I would highly recommend everybody put a code on their garage door so that their kids can get into their house for whatever emergency, anything. If you're in a car accident, they're not stuck outside. Is that something that you talk about as well?
Yes, you make an excellent point. So I did a show with a woman who worked at the Red Cross for 20 years, and she was prepared. And then those floods happened. The story's similar to yours, where her children were home alone. The road to their house was washed out. So it's so important for your children to know what to do during an emergency if you're not home and if you're not able to reach them. So it's good to talk to your kids and make your plan about how you would connect with each other, how you would survive. And we have a great website, as I mentioned, ready.ga.gov. It prompts you to ask these questions about your family. Just sit down over dinner. Think about an out-of-town contact. Sometimes it's easier to call out of state, believe it or not, the way the cell phone towers are, instead of across town. Think about your resources. Do you have a landline phone? If there's a fax machine, that's a landline phone. Do you use social media to communicate with each other? Sometimes that is useful. If you don't have power, how would you recharge your cell phone? Do you have a cell phone charger? Do you have a car battery charger? You can even plug your cell phone into the USB port of your computer and recharge it in an emergency. So look at your resources and think about some of those extra items you might need, especially with Christmas coming up. I always say that these accessories make great gifts. No weather radio is the gift of life. So think about those things that Santa can bring you.
And I do have a weather radio, and you're not sleeping through that.
Right. It's loud. A lot of people, make sure it's programmed for your county and it has a battery backup. And it's good to have redundant warning systems. Here in Georgia, every county determines the best warning system for its residents. So some counties use sirens, which are excellent outdoor warning systems, but they're not intended to wake you up. Sometimes you can get alerts on your cell phone. Some of the newer cell phones can get those wireless emergency alerts, but if your cell phone's not nearby or if it's on silent, you won't hear it. So it's good to have these redundant ways to get your warnings. Better to be woken up in the middle of the night and be alive than sleep through it and not make it.
So much to think about. And then let's just say a disaster does hit, and then we'll talk about medical emergency and all of those things too. But one of the things I know, I was talking to Lisa prior to the show, I open our new offices for hospice, and I have to submit emergency preparedness plans for our offices in order to be surveyed and pass survey. And one of the things I realized is it's very important to talk about a meeting place. If something were to happen and your house is destroyed, where will you meet? Or if you're not home, to know where to go and meet. Do you recommend that for families as well, or no? Stay
Absolutely. Put? We want to have 2 meeting places, one inside your neighborhood in case of a fire. So everybody knows specifically where they should go. So we're all going to meet up at the Smith's mailbox. Our neighbors had a fire a few years ago. The father ended up spending the night in the hospital. He didn't realize his son had escaped the house, so he went back in to save him and got smoke inhalation. He's fine now. But that's why it's just so important, again, to talk to your family and to test your plan. At our house, when our smoke alarm goes off, not only does it mean dinner's ready, it means it's a good time. That's a great time to test your fire plan. And second of all, you want another meeting place outside of your immediate neighborhood in case there's an earthquake or some kind of disaster that knocks out communication. You won't panic. You'll say, okay, well, we can't get home, but we know where we can meet. So it could be a community center, a library, anything that's nearby, but not in your immediate neighborhood. And it's a good idea to find an alternate route inside and outside of your neighborhood in case your usual route is blocked or underwater.
Okay. Now, well, I was going to go one place, but you just mentioned about being underwater. Can we give some tips for surviving floods in a one-story home or whatever? What do you do?
Well, after the first thing is you want to, again, make sure you have a way to receive your watches and warnings. I did a show with a local county commissioner whose mother-in-law was staying with him. He never realized that he lived in a floodplain until he had first responders knocking on his door. He had to leave with him and his mother-in-law, just with the whatever they had. So it'd just be good. Don't be in that position. I'm sure his mother-in-law never let him live it down. So pay attention to your watches and warnings. Know if you live in a floodplain. Know if you need to go to higher ground. So have everything ready to go. So that's the most important thing, is how to survive a flood. But second of all, I wanted to talk about these, I don't know, after Superstorm Sandy last year, those images of people going back to their homes and searching for their priceless heirlooms, and these photos and these sentimental tokens. And it's such a tragedy. Just take a few minutes, especially if you know the water is rising or you live in a flood-prone area, to gather them up. What is important to you? Seal them in a plastic bag. Put them up higher, put them in your attic, just your rings, your jewelry. You just don't want to be in that position where you would have to search through the rubble to try to find these priceless items.
And you can take a few minutes when you see the water's rising. You can get up to the attic and then get out, or
absolutely,
yeah, okay.
Absolutely.
I've never
you can't
been
take
in a
it
flood,
with you, but again, if you have enough notice beforehand, you should go ahead and do that.
So sad. I remember those images as well, because I'm from the north, and just so sad. Anywhere. And now Illinois is just awful.
And
horrible.
we even encourage people to go ahead and scan those images in and put them on the cloud or some kind of secure device so they can access them electronically, so they won't be lost forever, those photos and things like that.
Well, let's talk about electronics, because we are in the age of electronics now. So even if the computers are ruined, I guess a flash drive that goes with you in a purse. So what do you recommend there?
Whatever, again, looking at your resources, whatever's best for you. So a flash drive that can be locked securely would be a great option. A cloud, put it in the cloud. So only you can, somewhere online where only you can access it, Dropbox, any of these options, whatever works best for you. But again, it's good to have redundant systems in place.
Okay, so that was a testament to my lack of technological savvy, because you mentioned cloud. So for our audiences too, how does that work? They may want to investigate. They probably don't even know what the cloud is, some of them. I'm hoping, because I know what it is, but I don't know quite how it works.
Well, I'm a Mac user, so I have the cloud, but it's just that's where you can keep all of your data virtually. But any kind of server, if you're not a Mac user, you don't have a cloud, you can back up your computer on a hard drive and keep it in a safe deposit box periodically. As I mentioned, you could put it on important information on a thumb drive, right? It's just just like your business, you said your hospice, your business has to have a plan. Why wouldn't you have a plan just like you would for where you work? Same kind of thing for your personal data. And
it's so much easier because you can scan in your documents. You don't have to worry about if they get wet or if they get ruined, and you've got everything that you need. I love the idea of maybe just putting the flash drive in a safe deposit box at a bank.
Exactly.
That's terrific. I didn't even think about that. See, folks, even I'm learning here. And now I feel much better because cloud goes with Macs.
Right.
So that's why I don't use the cloud, because I use the regular type computers. I'm not technological. It's not one of my assets. Okay, so getting back to emergencies and disasters. So what about we talked a lot about children and having places. Did we leave anything out for families to be ready for natural disasters to hit?
I think the most important thing is to make a plan, to make sure you have your kit with all the items that you need. It doesn't have to be, you can do it on a budget. It doesn't have to be super expensive. Look for coupons, shop at dollar stores. You probably already have a lot of the items at your house. Maybe you just need a no-weather radio or extra batteries for your flashlight, something like that. The second thing you want to do is make sure you have a plan and sit down with your family and make sure everybody in your house knows what the plan is. Check with your child's school. You should be familiar that they have a plan. Every school in Georgia is required to have one. You might not know all aspects of it due to security reasons, but you should know how they would contact you in emergency. Make sure that your contact information is correct with the school and that you'll know how you'll be notified if something happens at the school. And the third thing is to stay informed. So you want to make sure you have redundant ways to receive watches and warnings and that you're weather aware so you won't be caught off guard by an emergency.
And I love what you said because I didn't know, have an out-of-state contact. Who knew that you'd be more prone to get through if you're calling out of state than if you're calling locally? I guess you should know. That makes sense now, but I didn't think about that.
Well, remember that earthquake in Washington, D.C. a couple years ago where they were encouraging people to stay off cell phones. So texting takes up less bandwidth than cell phones, so that's another option for you too.
Okay, and Facebook nowadays too is
social
fantastic. Media. Okay, so we've talked a lot about disasters and flooding and being prepared for tornadoes and hurricanes. We have so much more to talk about. I want to talk about fires. I want to talk about medical emergencies. I want to talk about what if something is to happen to you, just personally. But overall, medical emergency, persons in an accident or what have you, is it different? Are there other things that you should be thinking about?
Well, it's good for everybody to have first aid, which I would encourage that everybody take a first aid class, because if you're in an accident, the first person who's going to be on the scene is likely a good Samaritan. So you would hope that they would be trained. But if you live alone and are housebound, as you mentioned, nursing homes, assisted living facilities, they all have to have a plan. But what gives emergency managers heartburn are those folks who live alone and who are housebound. So it's particularly important for them to have a plan as well for a medical emergency or any other emergency. So it's important that they have a personal support network of people, trusted individuals who they can help make their plan with them. It's important that you have all your medical information. My mom keeps hers. There's a product called the Vial of Life that's a great resource for them. So there's a lot of different things. And again, you can visit our website at ready.ga.gov.
And also, it's so important to use your neighbors. Make sure your neighbors have, or a neighbor that you trust has your information, your insurance information, your next of kin information, people to contact if something were to happen to you. I worry so much about these people that live alone, and the neighbors are a key. Even if emergency responders come in, it may take them a minute to figure out who you are.
Help yourself +1. Once you get ready, check with your neighbor and make sure they're ready too.
Okay, great. Now, if someone wants to contact you, is there a contact number best to use?
Sure, you can call me at 404-635-7200, or you can visit our website at ready.ga.gov.
I would encourage you all to go to ready.ga.gov and just get the information on how you can prepare the best kit for you in your home to prepare for emergency. It's always better to be prepared. This show is called Better Living, and every single show I do talks about not waiting for the crisis to occur. No matter what we're talking about, be prepared, be educated, be informed, and communicate. Thanks for staying with me. We have to take a quick break. We'll be right back. Hello, I'm Jean Pete, and I welcome you back to our show, Better Living. Better Living is brought to you by the Homestead Hope Foundation and is sponsored by Homestead Hospice, where commitment to education and premier hospice care helps patients and families through life's most important journey. Thanks for staying with me. I'm Jeannie Pete, and I'm still here with Lisa Janik, and we're talking about being prepared in the case of an emergency, whether it's a natural disaster, a medical emergency, an accident, whatever the emergency is. We are here to help you get prepared and hopefully lessen some of the difficulties when you go through a crisis. So, Lisa, thanks for staying with me.
Thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here.
So at the beginning of the show, we talked about 3 days worth of supplies and how important it is to have an emergency kit ready in your home, whether you're a family, whether you live alone. 3 days worth of supplies. You have to take into consideration water and canned foods and non-perishable items. And I love what you said, that you should just check them to make sure they don't expire whenever you turn the clocks back or push it forward.
Exactly.
So every 6 months, and that's a great way to remember. And some of the things we talked about that should be in the kit are things like a flashlight, a weather radio, a whistle, which I hadn't thought about. But it's true, you might be weakened and you can't yell or scream for help if someone's looking for you, but the whistle you can blow into and it's very loud. Flashlight. Just some of the food items, peanut butter, tuna fish, so don't forget a can opener. We talked about Snickers bars because there's peanuts and chocolate in that, but that's a great idea because you'll get some protein. It'll keep you strong if you're in a disaster and have to get through. Canned fruits and vegetables, and whether to keep it in a plastic tub or a backpack, or keep it in a plastic tub with a little bag inside so you can grab and go if you have to.
Mm-hmm.
And then some other things that we want you to remember is always think about a meeting place. One in the neighborhood in case it's a house fire, and one outside the neighborhood in case it's the whole neighborhood that's been hit. So that if you can't find your loved ones, you know you've communicated and you can go to that safe place and wait for them to get there.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just peace of mind. Now, first aid. Do we keep first aid kits in our Ready Kit as well? And what do we want to have in those first aid kits?
So it's important to make sure that you can take care of those bumps and scrapes that you get in an emergency. So you want to have bandages, ointment, all the basic items, some aspirin, something like that. So if you have a headache or you have some pain, you can take that. The most important thing is if you call 911, make sure it's a real emergency. During the ice storm, we had people calling 911 to take them to the grocery store, to take them to the liquor store, to take them to the drugstore to get their medications because they didn't go beforehand. So it's important to think about these things ahead of time so you're calling 911 for true emergencies. And again, if you can take care of these little bumps and scrapes you get during a disaster without having to call them, it'll free up the first responders so that they can go and help people who are truly in need.
Okay, so this is something I want to impart on our audiences because it's something you said and it's very important. If you have a neighbor that you know has a medical condition or an elderly neighbor that you know is on a lot of medications and you know a hurricane's coming, you know something's going to hit, you know there's a chance that there could be an emergency, be neighborly, knock on the door. Hey, this is coming. I just want to make sure. Do you need me to pick up your medications from the pharmacy? Whatever. Make sure these people are set because they might be homebound. They maybe can't drive.
Exactly. And we're all in this life together. So reach out, talk to your neighbor, and see what you can do to help. Once you get yourself ready and your family ready, then help somebody else.
And then this sounds morbid, but I'm looking at you and you have a beautiful scarf on. And I'm just thinking, I am from Boston, and the marathon bombings really hit me hard when I watched that occur. And I heard over and over and over again, as we know, a lot of legs were amputated and limbs were amputated, and how important it was people taking the shirts off their backs to create a tourniquet. So it's not even a bad idea to keep a scarf or a belt in your emergency kit, especially if you're in a tornado alley, because you never know. You could have something, and that way you can stop the bleeding.
And there's a lot of ways you can get information about first aid. You can join a community emergency response team, which is great for churches or neighborhood groups, where not only do you learn first aid, but you go beyond that. You learn how to rescue people out of collapsed buildings. You learn how to do fire suppression. Plus, you get a cool helmet. So you can check with your local emergency management agency and see how to do that. So what I always say is that, getting your kit together is kind of step one in making your plan and staying informed. That's basic. Everybody should do that. But then take it a step further, do that extra credit, and go ahead and take that first aid course. Look into ways you can volunteer through CERT, or the American Red Cross. And that way you can get the skills to do all those things.
Yeah, great information. I'm so glad that you're here today. Okay, so we've talked a lot about disasters. We've given some ideas on what to put in the kits. Let's talk about fires. Then I want to go to medical emergencies. And I do want to talk about these folks that are shut in and seniors at home because they're near and dear to my heart. But let's talk about fire. Simple things we can do to prepare and to make sure that we've communicated with our children or our elderly loved ones what to do in case of a fire.
Exactly. You want to make sure you have an escape plan. So when I go and do my outreach efforts, I hear a lot of people say, well, I have all my kit ready. I have all my stuff. What else do I need to do? And I said, when was the last time you tested your escape plan? And very few people do. Our research shows that. But it's so important to do that, particularly if you live in a 2-story house. A lot of people don't have those fire ladders. They can just throw down and let their kids escape through that. You can buy them pretty much at any big box retailer. It's important for people to know that. They're not super expensive, and it could save your life. So make sure that you employ those once in a while, and make sure that everybody knows how to get down from that. Make sure everybody knows how to leave the house. And make sure that all of your smoke detectors are working. The best place to have a smoke detector is outside your bedroom. So make sure you have one in the hallway, and you have them throughout your house as well, and you check them regularly.
And here's the thing. I love those fold-up ladders that just hook onto the window, and I know the kids can get out. I used to lose sleep over it. So I do have one.
I mean, not good that you lost sleep.
But where do you keep it? You know, the boys' room is right above the kitchen. So do I want to keep it in there? Do I want to keep it in my bedroom? But I want the kids to be able to get out. That's another thing I lose sleep over. So you go and you get these things. Where's the best place to hold it?
Wherever. I would keep it in their room. So you could put it under the bed, sure, or in a chest or something like that in a closet.
Because, they are a little bit pricey. So you can't, I didn't get one for every bedroom, just some way for us to get out of the second floor. But you would recommend probably one for each bedroom?
Right.
But that was like $79.
Well, make sure that we'll have one in a central location then, if that's an issue. I mean, the most important thing is that you have another way to get out. Just like an airplane, you have several exits. So that's what you want to talk to your family about.
Okay. And then just real quick, we do all hear about stop, drop, and roll. But anything else that we want to tell folks about a fire, just top level? I know you're not a fire safety expert.
Well, it's good, especially with the holidays coming. Make sure that when you're cooking food, make sure that you watch that stove. Don't leave the stove on, particularly if you're frying turkeys. Those could be very dangerous. We don't recommend that you keep candles in your ready kit because of the risk of fire. So look at your flashlights. And it's just really important to make sure you look at your insurance and make sure that's all for any disaster. You want to make sure that your insurance is...
And what about Christmas trees? Can we just talk about that a little bit? Because every year at Christmas, there's some heartbreaking story about a family of however many, because the Christmas tree got dried out and lit on fire with the lights.
Just keep your Christmas tree well watered, keep an eye on it, and make sure when Christmas is over, make sure that you dispose of it properly. And again, you don't want to leave the lights. I think the lights are pretty safe, but just common sense, you just want to make sure those are off.
Are we seeing a decrease now because of new lighting technology or something? Or
yes.
Is it well, that's good.
Yes.
Well, that's good. Okay, so let's talk about medical emergencies. And I know that you have a personal story there. So let's first start with your story, and then we can help enhance other people's preparation from learning from you.
Sure. Well, I was so excited to come on here and help get people ready for a disaster, but particularly to talk about my mom's incident. So I work in emergency management, and even though I'm ready, a lot of times my own family doesn't listen to me about getting prepared, and my mom is no exception. And she had a medical emergency. She was very young, but she was taken to the hospital unexpectedly, and she had a dog. So the neighbors called me, and they said, what is the plan for the dog? And I did not know, because I had not sat down with my mom.
And she's out of state, so
right.
It's not like you could just drive over and get the dog.
She lives in Buffalo, New York. So it was 1,000 miles away, and I'm like, what am I going to do with her dog? Fortunately, the neighbors offered to take care of the dog till I could arrive, which was wonderful. So she has good neighbors, and that's wonderful how it takes a whole community to get ready. But it really sort of underscored the importance of making sure you talk to your loved ones about making sure that they have a plan and a kit and that they're prepared for anything.
And even who's the name of the vet for the dog.
Exactly.
So you could call them. Maybe they kennel them. Maybe they know where to go. If you don't have a neighbor that will take them in, that's a good place to start anyway.
Exactly. And another thing I learned is that I cannot make my mom's plan for her. I can talk to her about making a plan until somebody invents that mind control device. She will not always do what I say. So, but I can encourage her and I can cajole her to do it. But ultimately, she is the one. And that's really how it should be, because she knows the best way to prepare for her specific needs. And she is housebound. She does have some needs. We do research every year, and we know that in Georgia, I think a quarter of the population has some sort of mobility issue.
Wow.
So that's only going to increase with the baby boomers getting older. So it's so important to think about how, if you have limited mobility, how would you leave? If you can't drive, who would take you if you need to evacuate? Do you have a ride somewhere? Can you arrange for that? So all of those issues kind of came to a head, and it took an emergency for me to confront that and to talk to my mom about that.
And even now, get a little Ziploc bag with information to a neighbor, even if it's just one neighbor. Because with Obamacare, a lot of these new plans, you're going to get a doctor who's not going to be able to see you at 5 different hospitals. It might be one hospital. So even just information, if in case of emergency, here's the hospital I'd like to be sent to.
Well, we found it's what we encourage my mom to have a personal support network of neighbors, trusted family members, co-workers. So before, she was largely alone most of the time. And after this incident, we realized, okay, we need help in making sure that she's okay. So now she has a social worker who checks in on her. She has an aide. She has Meals on Wheels. She goes to adult day services.
That's great.
So she has this whole support network who can monitor her or touch base with me and just make sure. So if something's wrong, I get a heads up, and I don't get a call from a neighbor saying we've had to call 911. We can kind of head things off beforehand.
And I think you mentioned this before, something.
It's called a Vial of Life, which is one product.
Life.
But basically, you want to keep a list of your medications handy. I know when my mom was taken to the hospital, they told me she was not being cooperative. And the reason why is because they didn't take her glasses with her, so she couldn't see. So once she had her, she also likes to have sneakers that have tread in it so she can stand and feel secure, so she's afraid she's going to slip. So when she had those 2 things, she felt much more comfortable, and all of a sudden she was cooperating.
So there's another thing for your Ready Kit.
Right.
Make sure you put an extra pair of eyeglasses. I wouldn't have even thought of that.
Right. Those are particularly things for seniors, extra prescriptions.
Well, heck, I'm in my middle ages and I can't see without my glasses. I get a little ornery sometimes.
Well, for me, my contact lenses are a vital component of my Ready Kit. And as soon as we hear that tornado watch, we grab my contact lens stuff. But for seniors, they might want to make sure that they have their important documentation, their Medicare and Medicaid information, insurance information, their medical record, things like that.
Which is great to have in your emergency kit, but also I want to talk about this because if you do have someone checking in on someone who's homebound and lives alone and the emergency responders come in, I've seen in the past, there's a county here in Georgia, I think it's Gwinnett County, and there's a magnet. It almost looks like when you go to those concert events, it's a plastic thing and you can put paperwork and your ID in there.
Yes.
But it's magnetized on the back, and they have you putting emergency contact numbers, who your doctor is. You could do medications as well, and you put it on your refrigerator.
Yes.
And that's an incredible assistance to the emergency responders or the neighbor.
Exactly.
Whoever.
That's what my mom does, is now she keeps all that information on her refrigerator along with my phone number, big and bold. So if that ever happens again, they will know to look there.
And we're talking about people who live alone, but really, even for me, for you, for our producer, Catherine, it's good to have, I really want to go home and do this now. Here are the emergency people, here are the contacts that you need to call in case something were to happen to us.
Exactly.
Everybody should
do that.
And
your family should know that too. In an emergency, people tend to panic and they can't think straight. So it's good to have your spouse's work information, to make sure that you have your doctor's name. Make sure that you know your child's school information. And if you fill out a personal profile, you can pull that up. We have an app for smartphones, for your Android or for your iPhone, which is very handy. I know I was at the doctor's office and they were looking for my primary care physician, and I could just pull it up on
What's
my app.
That app?
It's the Ready Georgia app that we have.
So you just Ready Georgia and download it.
Yep, you can do it. And if you have one, if you fill out your personal profile on the website, it'll be available on the app. And if you make a change on the app, it'll be available on the website. So we recommend you do that so you have all that information, so you don't panic, and it reduces your anxiety. And once you fill out your personal profile, you can print it out and put a copy of it in your Ready Kit. And you can share it with your family and personal support network as well.
That's great, but people may not find the Ready Kit, so I'm also an advocate of that refrigerator label.
Yes, this is different. This is for first responders. If you're incapacitated, you want to make sure that first responders have the information they need, how to contact. The second one is for if you are not incapacitated, but if you just need, if you are thinking, oh my gosh, we had a disaster, I forgot my husband's work number, you'll have all that information at your fingertips.
And even just a listing of the people that live in the home. and a dog or two dogs
It
and a
goes
cat.
through. It prompts you for everybody in your household. That's how it knows how many supplies you need. It'll prompt you if you have a medical issue. We did this with the Department of Public Health, so it's very
great.
important for them as well. It'll prompt you for pet information. It'll to make sure that you have a ready kit for your pet. You don't forget about them. So it's a great resource.
So once you download this app, I'm so curious. I'm going to do this. And something were to happen to you, does Ready Georgia have access to that? Can they go in and find that
No,
information?
we're not a first respond. We're not
Okay.
first responders. So in an emergency, you'll call 911 if you need help. And what happens is if they get overwhelmed, they'll use their resources. But for example, during the floods we had in Georgia in 2009, they needed extra swiftwater rescue teams here in Atlanta. So they'll call us. There's a state of emergency. We're able to get those resources from around the state. And then if we get overwhelmed, we ask FEMA for a federal disaster declaration. But it all starts in your local community.
But I'm loving this app. So if you have this app on your phone and you're in an emergency, can you just pull the app up and hit something to alert someone and let them know?
No, it's not an alert, but you
Okay.
can receive weather alerts and public health. If there's a public health emergency, you'll be aware of that. It gives you preparedness information. It will send you to the closest open Red Cross shelter. After disaster, it has evacuation routes from the coast. After disaster, it will point you to the closest disaster recovery center from FEMA. So it's one-stop shopping. It tells you the disaster history of every county in Georgia. It's geolocated, so when you're driving around, it's kind of interesting to see what disasters happened where you are. It also gives you the closest flood gauge, so you know what your flood risk is.
So folks, again, that's Ready Georgia. To download the app on your phone, and then please go to readygeorgia.gov. Is it ready.ga.gov? And get yourself prepared today. I hope that we're motivating you right now to go to ready.ga.gov and find out what kind of kits you need to put together and what kind of preparedness you need to communicate and get yourself organized so that if a crisis does occur, you are much, much better off. And I feel like I've done a little bit to help, and that helps me too. It's not all about Jeannie Pete, but it would make me feel good. Okay, so you mentioned different areas of Georgia and different disasters or what have you. What are the biggest concerns for Georgia?
In Georgia, our top 3 weather-related killers are tornadoes, floods, and lightning.
Lightning.
Yes.
Let's talk about that. Yeah, I mean, and that usually comes hand in hand with the well, we don't really get a lot of hurricanes, but with the tornadoes.
Knock wood. We haven't had a major landfalling hurricane in over 100 years.
Oh, we don't even want to say
I don't want that to ever Savannah is always on the list of cities that are most at risk for a hurricane. But we can be impacted. Did you know, for instance, that after Hurricane Katrina struck the Gulf, Georgia bore the brunt of the tornadoes from that storm? We had 18 tornadoes in Georgia as a result of Hurricane Katrina. Our most costly disaster in Georgia was from Tropical Storm Alberto in 1994. They kind of dumped so much rain over Georgia for days and days. Very costly, horrible disaster. They had some of the cemeteries, they had some of the graves that were coming open from that. It was horrible. So even though we haven't had a major landfalling hurricane on our coast, it's still important. We're still at risk for that.
And the floods of 2009. And I remember Katrina. I had just moved here. And I thought, oh my God, I didn't know we had tornadoes in Georgia. What have I done?
Yes, and it's every time of year. We're more susceptible in the spring. They have a secondary tornado season. We hate to use the word season because they can happen any month, right? But we've had Gordon County in North Georgia. We had a powerful EF3 tornado that struck in December of 2011.
Was that Adairsville?
That was
awful.
this year. In January
okay.
of this year, an EF3, they got hit again in Bartow and Gordon County. So both of those, that happened in January. So they can really happen anytime. It's good to be aware.
It does seem like there seems to be a tornado alley, but we don't want to say that because it really can happen anywhere.
It can. And there was just a story out about how Tornado Alley is moving from the Plain States closer to Georgia. So again, and we've had these big swarms. When I first started at GEMA, they said, oh, Georgia doesn't have big swarms of tornadoes like they get out out in the Midwest, but we have seen 18 tornadoes after Hurricane Katrina. Our worst outbreak was 21 tornadoes. We have had 20 tornadoes. So we're seeing these bigger and bigger tornado swarms, and we're seeing very powerful tornadoes. Our latest was the EF4 tornado in 2011 that struck North Georgia and killed 15 people. Very tragic. But again, tornadoes very survivable if you know where to go, what to do. Make sure you get to your safe area.
And let's talk about that again, because this is, I don't do well. I really don't. I get teased, but I don't do well in tornado warnings. I mean, I think in my e-kit I need a bottle of wine. But
excellent for your ready kit. It's non-perishable now.
But that's right, and it ages with time, so I don't even have to worry about the clocks changing. Oh my goodness. But anyway, with tornadoes, I lost my train of thought thinking about the wine. But with the tornadoes, I worry. I did buy a home with a basement, thank God, because I am so afraid of tornadoes. But for these houses that don't have basements, it is just as safe, right? Because we see a lot of these homes being demolished, but there's one room in the middle that's okay. So I just want to put it out there for folks. Yes. The best place to go.
Best place is an interior room or a closet that doesn't have windows. My husband's family lives in Alabama, all on the same street. During that horrible outbreak in 2011, his cousin looked out the window, saw a tornado headed right toward his dad's house. He called his father up on the phone. They have a NOAA weather radio now, but at that time they didn't, and told him to take cover immediately. So he gathered up their pets and went to a closet, and that was the only room standing. The rest of the house was completely demolished. So again, if you get your alerts, if you know that action, if you don't have a basement, go to an interior room that doesn't have windows, closet, a bathroom, very survivable.
And a lot of places in Georgia, these basements have a lot of windows too. So it's just like another living floor. So still, it's not good enough just to go to the basement. Even in the basement, you need to be in an interior room.
Yes.
Okay. Yes. And under the stairs is what I hear is typically
that's
the safest.
That's a good place to go where there's some support.
Okay. Anything else that we want to leave as a parting wisdom for folks in the case of an emergency?
Don't be overwhelmed. Getting ready is easy and fun, very inexpensive, less than $100. As I mentioned earlier, you probably already have a lot of the items at home. You just need to gather them up. You can sit down with your family over dinner and talk about your plan and make sure everybody knows it. Make sure you test your fire safety drill, make sure your evacuation plan, and make sure you have a way to get your warnings wherever you go. This day and age, you can download our Ready Georgia app that'll give you all the preparedness information right at your fingertips.
And again, that's ready.ga.gov. And if you want to contact Lisa, you can also get in touch with the Georgia Emergency Management Agency at
404-635-7200.
Lisa, thank you so much for joining me. Important information. I hope you all will go out and do what you need to do to be prepared in the case of an emergency. Until next week, be safe. I'm Jeannie Pete. Thanks for listening. Have a blessed day and week ahead, and listen here same time next week and every week. Homestead Hope Foundation is your resource for a healthy life. God bless.